Hello and welcome. My name is Tara Fairfientink. I am the State of Vermont affiliate leader for the national organization, Parents' Rights in Education. We are parents and allies standing together, millions of voices speaking as one. You can sign up to be a free member on parentsrightsaneducation.com and sign up to be a local affiliate group in your area. We believe children and parents deserve to have total informed consent as children across the nation and world are making life-altering adult decisions as minors. A gender care clinic in Great Britain, the Tavistock Gender Clinic, was recently shut down. An independent study, Cass Review, by Dr. Hilary Cass in the UK reported and stated, "We need to know more about the population being referred and outcomes. There has not been routine and consistent data collection, which means it is not possible to accurately track the outcomes and pathways that children and young people take through the service. There is lack of consensus and open discussion about the nature of gender dysphoria and therefore about the appropriate clinical response. Because the specialist service has evolved rapidly and organically in response to demand, the clinical approach and overall service design has not been subjected to some of the normal quality controls that are typically applied when new or innovative treatments are introduced." After Dr. Hilary Cass did an independent case study on gender identity services, she stated, "The Tavistock Clinic in the UK needed to be transformed." She said, "The current model of care was leaving our young people at considerable risk of poor mental health and distress. Tavistock and Portman NHS Foundation Trust has been told to shut down the clinic in the UK by spring, after it was criticized in the independent Cass study review." We have international speaker Walt Heyer here with us tonight. I'd like to share his book, Trans Life Survivors by Walt Heyer. Walt Heyer was one of the first to receive the genital reconstructive surgeries and hormonal therapies. He offers a perspective based upon personal experience and research that is not acknowledged by the media, the Agency of Education, and educators. Parents have a right to know and make choices for their own children. Trans Life Survivors by Walt Heyer powerfully portrays the human toll inflicted by so-called gender experts who push gender transition on people who do not need it. This one-of-a-kind book is packed with information. Experience for yourself the raw emotions and the aha moments from 30 people who were convinced gender change was the answer, but came to see it was not. It is filled with the latest research and information, has a section for transgender teens and children with firsthand accounts, research and resources, and an appendix with resources for parents, people who want to detransition, and anyone who wants to understand the issue. Read in the survivors' own words why living the trans life didn't work for them and the concerns and challenges they face in going back. To those attending this event this evening, please be aware a 15-minute question and answer will be had at the end of Walt Heyer's presentation. Please respect the facilitators who will be at the mic to assist. Now, please give a warm welcome and round of applause for international speaker Walt Heyer.
Hello. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm grateful to all those who made it possible for me to take this time to share with you tonight. This is such an important topic and one that I've been speaking out about for at least 8 years because of my own personal experience. I started a website called sexchangeregret.com, and it's chock full of research, information, and personal stories, as well as books and other resources. So if you'll just jot down sexchangeregret.com, and after the video, You can go review the website and you'll find some outstanding information there that may help you. We want to address what's going on today with children who are being put through hormones and surgical procedures. And we want to address these issues because it's exploded starting back in 2013, when the DSM, prior to that, had called gender identity disorder a disorder. And in 2013, the DSM changed that to gender dysphoria, not because the diagnosis or terminology of gender dysphoria was going to help improve the care for young people, but it was going to make more accessible to them hormones and surgery. So it was more like going from a fast track to access to hormones. Prior to that, having used the terminology disorder, therapists were actually required, prior to 2013, to come up with a recognizable or identifiable disorder or comorbid disorder that would require them to have treatment for hormones and surgery. By going to gender dysphoria, they eliminated the need to look or identify any underlying disorders. That is what actually caused the explosion, and many, many more people, young people especially, having access to hormones and surgery, and the explosion and all of the gender clinics opening up because it was kind of like a free-for-all, that they could send out hormones to anybody asking for them with really little or no therapeutic reasons for doing so. So tonight, I want to read through some of the research that I've been doing for many years. And when you have the medical diagnosis of gender identity disorder or gender distress that comes from a feeling where your physical identity doesn't match with your internal perception, to the parents, certainly when they hear this from their child, a flood of questions come with this. What caused it? What is the treatment that will help them? What should parents do and what should parents not do are all questions that come up. First, parents, don't panic. Studies are showing that kids are not born with this disorder. A 2014 study shows no specific chromosome aberration associated with male to female or male to female transsexualism. A 2013 study looking for molecular mutations in the genes evolved in sexual differentiation found none, zero. So for parents, don't panic because your child was not born in the wrong body, but something did happen that caused them to not like who they are or not want to identify as who they are. Studies indicate that 2/3 of people who identify as transgender suffer from multiple disorders at the same time, or what's known as comorbidities. The top 3 disorders are evidenced in transgenders are depression, 33%, specific phobias, 20%, and social adjustment disorder, 15%. A child who states a desire to identify in the opposite sex has 2/3 chance of having some existing comorbid disorder. That's important for parents to realize. Further, the key to parents in helping young transgender identifying kids is to work with a professional to identify the underlying cause or stress the child is facing and correctly diagnose that comorbid disorder that exists concurrently with their gender distress. Parents are in the best position to identify the cause of this stress. And that's why parents are so important in this. And my heart goes out to them when a child identifies in this way. I understand some parents might dismiss the idea of comorbid disorders. They might feel strongly that they need to allow their child the freedom to change genders or experiment with their gender. They may think that will help reduce the child's depression because the child seems happier under these conditions. I know it does seem like they're happier too after my gender change, until the novelty wears off and you no longer provided this distraction from the troubles that were making you unhappy. Happiness turns to despair eventually, and the surgery didn't work, as we see in many cases, like in my book, and it leads to detransition and regret. And that's what we want to avoid. And that's why parents need to step in and make sure that we're evaluating each case individually so that children have the best possible care. And here's what's interesting. Dr. Marcy Bowers and Erica Anderson, both two trans women who practice gender medicine. These are people in the business of practicing gender medicine on adolescents. Both of these surgeons, who are WPATH members and have treated thousands of patients, are now urging more cautious approach instead of the current no holds barred affirmative care, where people are advocating just give them the hormones, allow them to change. They're saying both of these trans identifying doctors say no. For the first time in US, the two top gender medical professionals collectively acknowledge 4 facts. Early puberty blockers can lead to significant surgical complications and also permanent sexual dysfunction. Peer and social media influence actually are playing a larger role in encouraging kids to go down the path of hormones and surgery. And again, parents need to resist this, not encourage it. Anderson, one of the trans doctors, says we are likely to see more regret among these teenage girls in this population. It is my opinion that due to some of the let's see how it works, or let's just choose this, or let's just do something, is what she calls sloppy, very sloppy healthcare work. That we're going to have more and more young adults who will regret having gone through this process. And that is going to earn them a lot of, the doctors, both of them, are being criticized for coming out against this by their colleagues. But they say, I'm sorry, but this is the actual experience as being treated this. We need to be much more cautious and hold off until we can identify, as I talked about, the underlying comorbid disorders before we ever enter a child into hormone blockers or hormone therapies. I'm not saying this. These are two doctors who actually work in this field are saying we need to be much more cautious. And so they're saying what is actually sloppy about the healthcare work? It's rushing people through the medicalization. As you and others have cautioned, we see too many failures. We need to evaluate their mental health so that we have we're better prepared of making such life-changing decisions in case they really don't need it and we're going down the wrong path. These are important things the doctors are talking about. And that's why it's so important for us to have this discussion tonight. Dr. Andre von Moll, who is one of the top leading researchers, perhaps in the world, in 2022, he wrote something for the state of Florida regarding pubescent and adolescent age for minors. There have to be more follow-up studies before we introduce puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones, because we're finding the mental health has failed to improve after giving hormone blockers and surgery. Also, mental health, because psychotherapy and medical interventions were both provided, which one caused an improvement in their mental health. So we can see what they're really talking about here now around the world is being more cautious and doing more wait and see and not rushing to medical care. And doctors who are in the field are all collectively saying, let's take this slow. There's too much chance of too much harm, and we don't want that to happen to our children. So this is really an important cautionary note. And so I think we need to understand, like we're going to dive into this, because right now, as we sit here and have this discussion tonight, understand the UK, as was mentioned earlier, Tavistock's largest pediatric gender clinic has shut down due to poor evidence and the risks and harms of hormone therapy and surgery. That's in the UK. Sweden pulled back from its gender affirming care on minors. They say good psychotherapy is fundamental to good health and not using hormone blockers and surgeries. And I might add, they were one of the leaders in starting this. They are now one of the leaders in pulling back from it. This is important for parents and people who are suffering to understand. They're saying that good psychotherapy care is fundamental to good health. Finland, the third one, turns against puberty blockers for gender dysphoria. That's the third one. France. Sweden, France revert the cautious approach for gender diverse youth. Much more caution, and not just handing out hormones at any clinic, just giving them without a real deep dive into the underlying comorbidities is now the growing standard around the world. Norway decides not to use gender affirming care and go more for evidence-based care, which means they're looking again into a deeper dive into what is causing these issues to happen. And why is it important? I think it's important for parents to understand that when they're given hormone blockers, many of them don't know. Tonight, we're talking about the harms. And if you don't know, giving hormone blockers to children causes them to not grow. They actually don't develop and grow properly. They suffer, in many cases, liver damage. They suffer, in many cases, mental health problems. One of the big ones, too, is skeletal damage because of bone thinning, because there is an interruption in their proper development skeletally and all their organs in their body. That's important. That is harming children. And that's one of the reasons why you see 2 doctors in the US say we need to caution ourselves on doing this to children. And you have 5 countries pulling back. Infertility, osteoporosis, and cardiovascular disease are also linked to hormone blocking therapies. These are not things that parents should be encouraging children to take when you see the damage being done. Brain swelling, vision loss, according to the FAA in July of 2022. These are all sound studies. I'm not making the claims. I'm reading the research to you tonight. Going through puberty is what actually helps develop a healthy brain, healthy bones. Isn't that what we should be doing? So if we have something that's causing them to not have a healthy brain or healthy bones or liver damage, we should always protect our children from being harmed by any medication that is not going to help them throughout their life. And they're in their early childhood. This is very critical that we do the right thing. Harm from cross-sex hormones, taking testosterone increases the risk of heart attack and strokes. Liver dysfunction, diabetes type 2, body and facial hair growth in male pattern baldness, deepened voice are often permanent in people, girls, especially who are going from female to male. And I will tell you that at my website, Sex Change Regret, some of the most heart-wrenching detransition stories are the girls who took hormones for years and are in the process of detransitioning, and they have tons of body hair, their bodies changed, their voices changed, and they are far more depressed and distraught after having gone through this, because no one really told them about the consequences of taking hormones and hormone blockers. And that's why we're talking about it tonight. That's one word that should be at the top of every discussion in schools, parents, and in every home about what are the consequences. And we should be wise to look at them and not dismiss them because they're critical. For males taking estrogen, blood clots, heart attacks and strokes, breast cancer, weight gain, and insulin resistance. The consequences of surgery are parts are, and this is for both male and female, permanently mutilated. Here's an interesting thing the studies are showing. 50% of people who go through the surgical procedures suffer complications, pain, where the surgery's done, bleeding. They have lost sexual function and urinary dysfunction as well. This is really important for us to understand. Do we really want to subject anyone of any age to being the possibility of suffering from all of these things that happens? Maybe good intention, but maybe we should be waiting and looking what the underlying issues are. They'll be much easier to treat than these issues that are permanent and permanently damaging them. Permanent sterility. That's one of the big things that people fail to talk about. These children, boys, will not be able to produce sperm, and the girls won't be able to produce a baby. So we're raising a generation of children that won't be mothers or fathers, because they won't, unless they adopt somebody, they won't be able to actually bring in a child or be a part of the birth process. That seems to be very important. And I know the people that I'm working with who have regret about doing this, one of the things they report to me, especially the men, man, I just wanted to be a father. I'm so sorry that I didn't know what was happening. And one individual I'm working with right now, they did the surgery on him and gave him hormones when he was suffering from schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and PTSD. And he had been under the medical care of Kaiser Permanente in California for 10 years. And they knew this, and they still followed through with the hormones and surgery. Kaiser Permanente has now got at least 4 cases that I know of medical malpractice because they gave the wrong person hormones and surgery, people who did not need it, and it's destroyed their life. Chloe Cole is another one, and Richard is one of my clients. These medical malpractice cases are happening because people are not paying attention to taking a cautious, more effective approach using psychotherapy and looking into the underlying causes that are making people uncomfortable with who they are. And there are many things that we need to take into account in doing this, and stop rushing kids to gender clinics or Planned Parenthood where they can just get all the hormones they want. It's not healthy, and it's damaging a generation of children. Sweden has reported, because they actually have medical records on absolutely everyone in the country, and this is not speculation. They report your 19 times higher suicide rate up to 10 years after having hormones and surgery. 19 times higher suicide rate. That's not speculation. It's not some thing that somebody invented. This is actual factual findings in the country of Sweden, and they study everyone, and they've been doing the study for over 30 years. So it's not something that just popped up. We need to pay attention because our children are important. This next generation needs to be able to assess properly and be able to understand that while they do not need hormones and surgery, but they need something that will actually help them in the long run, not in the short run. research claim, we know that suicides, like Sweden has done, has been an issue for years. And even as far back as 1979, Dr. Charles L. Ihlenfeld, who was the director of one of the first gender clinics in the United States, who administered hormone therapies to over 500 individuals, and he was there for 6 years as an endocrinologist, actually came out in 1979 saying hormones and surgery are causing far too much unhappiness and too many suicides. So the suicide issue has been out there and been part of our social speak for a long time. We need to pay attention to it and not dismiss it. Here's one of the, because I get letters from people who've gone through these procedures, and I think it's important for us to stop and take a breath and look at actually one particular case. This is Nathaniel, and he wrote me 1 year after sex change. He was a teenager. He wrote to me and said, I feel like I'm a Frankenstein hack job. Less than a year after having gender surgery, Nathaniel now says the whole thing was a bad idea. I'm 19 years old, and I feel as though I've ruined my entire life. Nathaniel's case, he says he was bullied by boys in elementary school because he was a sensitive child and preferred playing with girl games. When he was a bit older, he discovered the internet and pornography. He heard about transgenderism, and that's when he says he was convinced himself that he was a transgender just from being on the internet. When he finally woke up, got the nerve to talk to his mother in the summer, he was in the 8th grade. He made an appointment. He was only 15, and his parents took him into a gender clinic on his 15th birthday, and they prescribed him the cross-sex or the gender blockers, hormone blockers. And from then on, he says, I slowly detached from everything until I was just staying at home, playing video games, going on the internet all day long. I stopped reading. I stopped drawing, which I used to love. I stopped riding my bicycle. I surrounded myself in an echo chamber of just people that supported and validated my poor decisions, because the others were also, unfortunately, stuck in the same pit that I was in. That's Nathaniel saying so. He was 18 years old when he wrote this. A month after his 18th birthday, Nathaniel had what is euphemistically called bottom surgery. For a male like Nathaniel, that means refashioning his male genitalia into a pseudovagina. He suffered from complications that required a second surgery a few months later, and he had facial surgery to further feminize his appearance. Now I am healed from all the surgeries. I regret them all. The result of the bottom surgery looks like Frankenstein hack job at best. And that got me thinking critically about myself. I had turned myself into a plastic, surgical, whimsical part of a woman, but I knew I still wasn't a woman. Pretty sad story from a 19-year-old. The unpopular truth, he writes, unfortunately, I learned the hard way at this young age, that a man is a man, a woman is a woman, and you can't change or become something else, not with surgery, not with hormones, not with any kind of feminizing issues. So what Nathaniel is saying, we can feminize men, we can masculinize women, we can't change their gender identity. They can say they changed it, but medically speaking, hormonally speaking, nothing really changes. For years, many of the doctors have been talking about this whole thing about who and who shouldn't transition. One of the studies that I looked into was by a doctor who's been working, Christina Olson, a research psychologist at the University of Washington, looks at it this way. We just do not have enough definite data one way or the other as to who is going to benefit from hormone blockers or transitioning. We do not have enough information. That's why it's important that we sit down with a good psychotherapist, take a deep breath, and take time to evaluate each individual case. That's why Olson is leading a study of 300 trans children that will look at the outcomes. Listen to this. This is so important. Over a 20-year period. You see, this is not some little flash in the pan, everything's going to be all right. Christina Olson, a researcher, says it will be at least 20 years before we have information as to who will benefit, if anyone, from hormones and surgery. She says we'll be able to hopefully answer which children should or should not transition, she said. In other words, we simply don't know right now, yet parents and children are heading into the gender clinics by droves, even though we don't have enough information to adequately assess what the long-term outcomes are going to be. And that's why Olson says it's going to be 20 years. I got a letter from someone who started early in life as a child and went for many years and says, I underwent the surgery. I was convinced that it was the right thing to do. Regrettably, it was not. The price I paid was dear. I hurt the ones I loved the most, my children, my sibling, my parents, and my partner. By all appearances, I am a success, surgical success. I have a good job. I'm a high school teacher. I've been fairly active in my love life, etc. But none of these can ever make up for the pain and the guilt that I experience every single day. They're writing saying, I wonder if you know any surgeons who can remove my breast implants. I would really like to start living as a man again. These are sad stories. And the fact of the matter is they're totally unnecessary. Because if we just stop and begin to evaluate what we know to be true, that many things happen early in life. And I want to if you haven't heard this before, maybe you have, I want to introduce you to a term called adverse childhood experiences. They're called ACEs. These ACEs include many things like a child suffering from a father who maybe died in a car accident or a plane accident, or just died from a heart attack when they were young. Maybe one of the parents was incarcerated. Maybe they were sexually abused, the child. Maybe they were physically abused. Maybe they were put in foster care. There's about 10 different ACEs. The emotional and psychological effect of ACEs results in a child being traumatized. And we know that when a child is traumatized from research, that it alters their brain at the level of where their identity is being formed. And so they come out trying to find a new identity because of the trauma they suffered. Do they need gender therapy? What I have found is they need a trauma therapist to deal with the trauma they suffered as a child. Even a divorce can be very traumatic. A child feeling unsafe in their home can be very traumatic. Even the emotional and psychological trauma. I think one of the biggest things that I've seen in working with families and working with adults and children as well is that we overlook emotional and psychological trauma. We need to sit down and have a huge discussion about the effects of emotional and psychological trauma. I can sit here and tell you from my own experience tonight that having cross-dressed at the age of 4 years old and being affirmed at 4 years old, at that point, I can look back now and see that that was emotional and psychological abuse that caused a traumatic effect on my life. It confused me as to what my identity was and who I was. It caused me to be depressed and anxious about who I was, and I had no place to turn. And that's one of my own life experience is why I have such huge passion and why I've spent the last 33 years researching these subjects and speaking out about it and trying to help people identify the underlying comorbid disorders, ACEs. And we know the internet is a huge impact on children. As Nathaniel pointed out, probably the third and one of the most serious ones too today is what Marcy Bowers and the other doctor talked about was the social influence. We call it a social contagion. Many of these children who are identifying as having gender dysphoria really are dealing with a social contagion because their friends do it, they want to do it, they want to be popular. And so identifying as a transgender today is kind of popular, and it brings a host of well-meaning people into your life. But the tragedy is the harm that is being done by this will last you a lifetime. And that's why we need to speak out and have parents and others start looking at adverse childhood experiences, the ACEs, and look at the internet. I ask parents to be sure to not allow your child to have a computer in the bedroom by themselves at night. This is critical because they get online and they get hooked into these things like Nathaniel did. And he said he was addicted to pornography. We can't allow these things to happen because they cause a great deal of damage, not only to your family, but to the children themselves. And again, these things last a lifetime. You know, I was cross-dressed at 4 years old, and it's lasted me a lifetime. I'm still talking about what happened in 1944. I'm 82 years old. So any parent out there who thinks that cross-dressing or allowing a child to spend his time identifying as a girl or a girl identifying as a boy is just a whimsical little thing that is harmless. If it was harmless and whimsical, I would not be talking to you 78 years later. We need to understand this is the consequence. It changes lives. It destroys families. It causes brain damage. It causes sexual dysfunction. And many of these children, when they become adults, will not be able to be a mother. They will not be able to be a father. And I get the emails all the time. I've said it many times, and I'll say it again tonight. My website, Sex Change Regret. I will close the site down when people stop writing me and telling me about their own sex change regret. And if you think that I'm just a one-off person and I don't know what I'm talking about, then I suggest what you do is you go to a Reddit site called r/dtrans. On that site, which I know the person who founded the site, look on that site, and what you will find there is about 50,000 regretters and detransitioners. This is not Walt Heyer. 50,000 people are suffering regret and going through the detransition process. We have a lot of medical malpractice cases now evolving in our court system, especially in California. There are numerous documentary films out there showing the harm being done. And if you want some of those documentary films and you want to look at them, you can write my website, sexchangeregret.com. I suggest that if you want to protect and raise your children to have a healthy mind, healthy bone structure, healthy livers, and a healthy body, you will avoid allowing them to have access to hormone blockers, hormone therapy, and any surgeries. Thank you.
Thank you for this presentation first, and your courage in speaking out. Do you have any ideas how we got here? Number one, in the last, it seems like short period of time, like a switch was flipped.
Yeah.
I mean, I have theories, but I wonder what you think. And
Yeah. Mhm.
the other question is, why aren't the policymakers looking at the decisions being made in 5 nations, the UK, Sweden, Finland, France, and Norway, instead of putting flags up in front of our White House?
What the switch that got flipped, you're absolutely right. A switch got flipped, and it was when they changed the diagnosis from gender identity disorder in 2013, and you see a spike from when they changed it from gender identity disorder to gender dysphoria that allowed the gender clinics to ignore disorders and move right into giving hormone blockers and hormone therapy and surgery. And that's why we see so many girls having their breast removed. That was a critical move by the advocates to get the word disorder out of the DSM, because to get medical care prior to dysphoria, they had to have a recognizable and identifiable disorder to qualify them to have treatment. And what I have found also in working with families and doctors is that actually the proper term, if we were to have a discussion and dive deep into it, is actually generalized dysphoria, because what we're finding is the issues that kids are suffering from are really not about gender. They're about many other things, as I spoke to, about a parent dying or being put in foster care, all these other things, these ACEs, and being addicted like Nathaniel to pornography. When we began to really take a deep evaluation, we find out that none of the issues that kids are suffering from are actually related to gender dysphoria. It is generalized dysphoria because their life in many ways in general has been disrupted and they don't feel safe in their own home, or something has happened. So the first answer is it was flip the switch when they changed it from gender identity disorder to gender dysphoria. You're absolutely correct. The explosion occurred. Now, I have been at on Capitol Hill recently, along with many other people. It's not just me. And I've been in many state legislators speaking with them. We are trying to get people to take a look at what these other countries, who were the leaders originally in pursuing hormones and surgery for children, are now the people who are pulling back desperately. And Tavistock, the judge, when the judge ruled against them having absolutely, they were supposed to bring to the judge evidence that proved that hormone blockers, hormone therapies for children was effective, and they could not bring one iota of good evidence to the judge. That's why that Tavistock clinic is being closed. So we are definitely trying to work with the policy people, and there's policy organizations all over the country that are working hard to try to close this gap and prevent children from being harmed, because none of them need hormone blockers. None of them need their breast cut off or their genitals cut off. None of them need to go through these horrible, harmful procedures that are being done by the gender clinics. Another question.
Hopefully not.
Get my thoughts together here. I've been listening a little bit about how our healthcare system in the US is very different than the healthcare system in Europe. And that is why Europe is able to see the truth. And their healthcare system has oversight that ours doesn't. So my concern in the US is that we're not going to be able to overcome that. And that the only way that we're going to be able to do anything about this is through lawsuits, unfortunately. But we have signs outside that say trans care is health care. Well, if trans care is health care, then why isn't the healthcare community supporting the transition? Because that's part of the journey.
Okay. I think we're making a lot of headway, actually, because we now have 20 states in the United States that are preventing children from having access to hormone therapy, hormone blockers, and surgery until they're 18 or older. So we are making ground. And you are absolutely right. I do believe that the lawsuits are going to play a big part in it. But I think in concert with more states not allowing clinics to give hormone therapy and surgical procedures to young people is also going to work to help stem the tide. I think what I have been trying to do is to educate parents in understanding that they play a big role in not taking their children to gender clinics, and look at the underlying issues in their early life and learn about, and I ask every parent, if you have a child that is struggling, look up the word adverse childhood experiences and study those 10 ACEs. Or if you're aware of your child spending a great deal of time on the internet, then I suggest you as a parent, go look at the search engine on the computer and see what they're actually looking at. These are critical things that parents can actually do to help their child find a way of getting back to understanding that they may be suffering from some sort of trauma, or as Nathaniel, again, the addiction. And these are things that can be treated very easily without using hormone blockers, hormone therapies, or identifying as a different gender. So I think everybody plays a role in this. I have a part in it. Parents have a part in it. Legislators have a part in it. If we all join together, we have a huge power base where we can have a tremendous effect on helping prevent children from going through these needless hormone blockers and surgeries. That's really our job, and that's why we're talking about it tonight. So you have good questions, and I appreciate that.
Hi, thank you for participating in this tonight for us and providing us with such beneficial information. One of the things that's come to mind throughout your talk tonight was the Hippocratic Oath of first do no harm. And to me, I question the motivation of some doctors that continue to do this. And along with that, do you feel that there are ulterior motivations, or, for example, pharmaceutical companies, when someone transitions, they pretty much have a customer for life? Do you feel that's any part of this?
Well, absolutely. There's a lot of money to be had, and I don't know if the number is accurate. So I've just heard it talked about when I've been at conferences, but they say if they can get a young child transitioning, the pharmaceutical company has about a $200,000 benefit from doing that for each child. So we know the gender clinics are making a boatload of money off that. We know that gender clinics have been caught on tape saying we've got to do this because it's very profitable. But again, it's sort of like the boycott of Bud beer. If we boycott and keep our children out of these clinics, they're going to suffer. And that's one of the things that parents can prevent their child from going into these clinics. Start thinking more about trauma therapy if they're struggling, and far less about gender therapy, and we'll have some much greater effect. But yes, there is a lot of money to be had. I don't want them to get that money. I would rather spend that money on a trauma therapist that can do some effective work in finding out what caused that child to want to self-destruct. Because if we look at what's happening with the whole transgender ideology, every part of that process is about self-destruction. They want to destroy their name. They want to destroy their identity. They want to destroy their looks. That right there should tell us that these children are suffering, and it's not about their gender. I can't emphasize that enough. I have literally worked with thousands of individuals, and going into the process, had someone been able to speak up and talk to them about the fact that you're not suffering from gender dysphoria, you're suffering from something else. Let's find out what it is. We actually prevent them from ever going to a clinic. They all realize it was not about gender dysphoria when they come out the other side. At least the ones that I've worked with all will say, you know, I now know I can't become a woman and I didn't have gender dysphoria. Like Richard, who I work with, who's been harmed by Kaiser Permanente, he was suffering from schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and PTSD, and they did surgery on him. I've had clients who, he was 22 years old. He suffered a traumatic brain injury in a car accident, and a gender clinic cut his genitals off and gave him breasts and told him he was a female. The mother contacted me horrified because he was barely able to survive on his own. The gender clinic took advantage of him. We can stop this if we just understand that it's not about gender, and they don't need hormones and they don't need surgery. We need to love our kids, and we have an oath too, a Hippocratic oath as parents, to protect our children. And we can do that by looking at what's on their computer and making sure they're not getting indoctrinated. And if we need to keep them out of the public schools, then by golly, take them out of public schools. Do what you need to do to protect your children. Otherwise, they're going to suffer consequences that are going to destroy the family. So those are great questions you have, and I appreciate them.
So, hi, that's a good segue for me that about school. There's a rumor that, or kind of a hearsay rumor, that there's something going on in schools that's catching these kids when they're very vulnerable, very little, and influencing them somehow in this decision or helping them question. I just recently had some evidence of this, of a very small child coming into our practice at 4 years old, deciding to change. Is there something going on in schools?
Absolutely. They are the ones who are traumatizing our kids. They're actually causing them trauma. If you look at adverse childhood experiences, if you're a therapist, you know what that is. And you look at what they're doing in schools, they are actually engaging in adverse childhood experiences in our young people, showing them pornography, engaging in things that are destroying their ability to understand their role as a male or a female, and confusing them to the point to where they don't know which side is up and who's what, because they're just slicing through this whole thing as if you can invent a gender. You can't. We all know here tonight, listening to this, that when the sperm hits the egg 9 months before you're ever born, everything is settled. You're either a male or female. There is no other thing. Now, there may be some medical problem that occurs, but that doesn't require anybody to have hormone blockers or surgery unless it's to repair something, but they're not transgender. They're called intersex or something else. So I think it's important for us to understand that we're being led down the primrose path by our children, and we need to be careful what we allow them to see on television. We need to be careful about our conversations about these issues and what they see. And again, I can't stress this enough, protecting our children today is essential, because the public school system has just turned into an LGBT trans center for indoctrinating our youth. They want your kids. Even the president of the United States says there are kids, and we know that's not true. They're God's kids. And so we need to protect them. Another great question. Thank you. And one last question.
Well, thank you for your time. First off, I want to say, in all fairness to the public school system, boy, I've done a lot of work with different ones. It's unfair to say that the school categorically has this agenda. They get federal funding and they have to meet criteria. Some of them subscribe to it, some of them don't. Personally, I had to go to court when my youngest graduated in 2018 and fight our school because they thought they knew what was best for my son, and I knew what was best for my son, and we prevailed. So that's, I think, better to say individual. My question really comes around a couple of things, because to my point, there's a resistance for parents. We're losing ground when we try to stick up for our own rights to parent our children, to make informed decisions, and to abide by that. There's a resistance, the threats to take us to court, the threats to your kids. Where do you see that going with all this? And the second question I have is, well, three actually, informed consent. These children can't make an informed decision. So how can they consent to have a surgery when they don't fully understand what they're agreeing to? And the third part is, anybody talking about class action lawsuits
Well,
by the parents?
you almost gave me too many things to remember. I'm an old man, so you gave me three of them there, but I'll do my best. The class action lawsuits are bound to come about because they've overstepped their bounds, and they've cut the breast off of far too many girls, and they've injected hormones into too many boys. How long that's going to fester? I started thinking about this actually last night, that the cases against Kaiser Permanente in California, I think, potentially could turn into a massive class action lawsuit. And you're right to point out that not every school is indoctrinating the children, but the children, obviously, that I work with have been indoctrinated by the schools, and that's why I have such a visceral reaction to it. I've actually worked with one parent who, without the mother's knowledge, she's a wonderful lady. I went and actually met her at the house and met the child. And they were indoctrinating her daughter at 10 years old, and secretly letting her identify as a boy, and actually to the point to where the girl, because of the school doing this, she became so traumatized, she had to go to a mental hospital for a week because of what the schools had done to that child. Now, working with the mother and the child and the father, we got her out of the mental institution, took her home, kept her out of school. She got good psychotherapy. She's now 12 years old. She is an excellent violinist. She is an excellent writer. She's an artist of unbelievable skill. They were about to destroy a young girl's life. And thank God for the mother contacting me and working together to prevent that child from going back to that school. We saved a life, and she is just flourishing. Beautiful young girl. This is what I'm talking about. I agree with you. Not every school is doing this, but the ones who are, you can recognize it and begin to understand. You need to know what the schools are doing to your children, and have your children report to you what they're doing. Because if they're harming them and showing them books that are sexually explicit, that will destroy your child. And that's what I'm speaking to. And so I think all of us need just to take a step back and take a deep breath and understand that we are under siege, and we need to become better educated. And there are many resources out there. My books, my website, sexchangeregret.com. I just got back from last night, not even 24 hours ago, from Spain. Next weekend, I'll be in New Zealand, and then I'm off to the Czech Republic 2 weeks later, talking on these same issues, because people are becoming more and more aware about the need to dive into these adverse childhood experiences and turn away from gender clinics. And if a kid's suffering, let's start looking at the trauma therapist as a way to help our children and prevent them from going through unnecessary hormones and surgery. So thank you all very much for allowing me to share tonight. I hope we had we were able to help some people gather some more resources and information. Trans Life Survivors, a great book. All my books, I say, are great books. And so if you want to look at the history of this, you go back and get my book, Paper Genders, another great book. So thank you again. It was a delight to be on. I care for you all. My heart just goes out to you in the struggle. God bless you.
Thank you everyone for joining here tonight. I myself am a parent who's been in Addison Northwest School District, and I can validate and attest to the fact that public schools are teaching minors controversial content without parental knowledge or consent. I had my 3rd grade daughter coming home to tell me what was being discussed behind closed doors without parental knowledge or consent. And there were several families withdrawing their kids from health class. And it's an issue. When we called the district out on lack of transparency, they said, well, we're being transparent with you now. And as a parent, that wasn't a great answer. You know, we are parents and allies standing together, millions of voices speaking as one. The Addison Northwest School District has the ABAR District Reading Program, which stands for Anti-Bias, Anti-Racist. And that is filled with, that's read from kindergarten through 6th grade. It's reading a bunch of cartoon books about transgender children going through their process. This is being affirmed by staff and teachers and educators, and parents have a right to know what's being discussed behind closed doors without parental knowledge or consent. And in Montpelier, we passed Article 22 in our Constitution, which did not define reproductive liberties. We just had H89 passed in the House, which did not define guardianship, which allows doctors, psychologists, teachers to also step in and take the role of guardian if parents are not going to be supportive of children going through their transgender process. That is absolutely possible. And then we have S37, which is a shield bill that was just passed in the Senate in Montpelier that talks about protecting the providers, but not the patient. So if a patient comes forth and wants to detransition, it does not protect the patient, it protects the provider who provided the genital reconstructive surgeries and hormonal therapies and puberty blockers. This is a national crisis. As the state of Vermont affiliate leader for Parents' Rights and Education National, I am calling a call to action. Please sign up to be a free member on parentsrightsandeducation.com. I encourage parents across the state of Vermont and the nation to become an affiliate leader and member of FREE. We are winning because we are standing together. We believe it is important to hear both sides and the full spectrum of this matter. We have received support from multi-millions on Twitter. Our followers are more determined than ever to stop schools from messing with our kids. As parents, we have a responsibility to guide and raise our children. Other people don't have the right to talk to our children about controversial content. That is what they are saying. We have the right to teach your children these things. No, they don't. This goes against the natural, inalienable rights of parents. Train, speak, change. This is what we need to do. Go to parentsrightsandeducation.com, sign up as a free member, and sign up as a local affiliate. Parents and allies standing together. Millions of voices speaking as one. Stop messing with our kids. It ends here. The answer is you. Thank you for being here tonight.
Hey, everybody. I'm Suzanne Gallagher, National Executive Director of Parents' Rights and Education. I am honored to be a part of your committed effort to restore parents' rights in K-12 public schools. Let's begin by taking our school boards back from the spell of wokeness. We can do this. As parents and allies, we represent millions of voices standing up for children, united to stop the destructive politicization of our K-12 education system. Together, we will restore parent involvement in creating policy at the local level. We advocate for the natural rights of parents to speak for their children and reject the purposeful plan by a massive public bureaucratic system to indoctrinate our children with extreme pedagogy. We support the proper role of K-12 education, teaching academic curricula and core skills, preparing students for productive success in life. We reject forcing extreme controversial sexualization and racist doctrine on minor children. We reject the notion public school bureaucrats and staff have legal authority to circumvent the relationship between parents and children, facilitating access to mental health counseling and medical procedures without parent knowledge. These corrupt institutions have been taken over because conservatives decided not to make waves, but to navigate the system and get their degrees without incident. No more, guys. If conservatives run away and set up alternative schools, those corrupt institutions will just become stronger, still claiming a majority of graduates who in turn vote and hold positions of power. Our position must be to take our schools back by holding public institutions accountable to ensure academic and basic life skills are taught. In addition, parents' natural, inalienable rights to direct the education of their children must be restored by repeal of unconstitutional local policies and state and federal laws. Local control, where school boards set policies to benefit and honor all students and families, must be restored. All students deserve to feel safe. I personally invite you to join us in this fight by visiting our new website, trainspeakchange.com. Oh, I love that. Train, Speak, Change, and take the free trainings available now. You will learn how to give testimony at your school board meetings and how to run for school board. Those and other trainings are free to all who need them. Sign up for our emails and join a local and state group. We are here to give parents tools, helping them to stand against those who are stealing their rights. Stand with us, parents' rights in education.